The world knew him by a single word that outlived applause. Always. A silhouette in a black coat, a voice that could lower a room into silence, a gaze that carried both judgment and mercy. But the man behind that gaze kept his truest performances off-screen, pressed between paper and ink. Years after the curtain fell, a book arrived, his own diary, written in private, left behind like a map through rooms he never showed us. Between notes from sets and stages, he recorded the cost of staying upright when the body asked for rest, the weight of returning to a role that had become a destiny, and the unvarnished truths about colleagues, directors, and the machinery of fame. These pages did not shout. They breathed, and in that breath, an altogether different portrait formed. Not the cold professor, not the villain we learned to love, but a craftsman at war with deadlines, a guardian of integrity, a man measuring time by the honesty of each scene. He did not explain himself while he lived. He left the explaining to words that waited. What really happened behind the light we thought we understood? Before he was a symbol of quiet tragedy, Alan Rickman was a craftsman of control, a stage-trained actor whose voice could slice through air like glass and soothe it again a breath later. Born in London in 1946, he built his art not on fame, but on precision. Long before Harry Potter, he had already become a legend on stage and screen, from the elegant cruelty of Die Hard's Hans Gruber to the restrained heartbreak of Sense and Sensibility. Every role carried the same signature, stillness that spoke louder than words. But behind that composure lived a mind that questioned everything, the process, the fame, even himself. When the world fell in love with Severus Snape, Rickman's life changed forever. His voice, once for theater lovers, now belonged to millions of children who saw him as both hero and villain. Yet inside, he wrestled with what it meant to be trapped in one image, one legacy. The diary he left behind became his mirror, a confession without confession, filled with wit, exhaustion, loyalty, and loss. Through its pages, we glimpse not the man fans imagined, but the artist who feared becoming what fame demanded. He gave the world magic, but the price was silence. And within that silence lies the story behind the spotlight, the one even he never meant for us to read. Before Hollywood ever called his name, Alan Rickman belonged to the stage. Born into a working-class London family in 1946, he learned early that art was not a privilege. It was survival. His father died when Alan was 8. His mother, Margaret, stitched dresses to keep the family together. At school, his teachers saw something rare in the quiet boy who spoke softly but carried thought in every pause. He studied graphic design before theater, drawn first to lines and texture, the same discipline that would later shape his acting. At 26, he entered the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, far older than most classmates. Yet that lateness became his strength. He approached performance not as a game of fame, but as architecture. Every gesture built to hold emotion steady. By the 1,980 seconds, he had conquered the British stage. His breakthrough in Les Liaisons Dangereuses stunned audiences, a villain so composed it frightened them. The performance took him to Broadway, then to Hollywood. Die Hard made him global overnight. But Rickman never mistook attention for a rival. In his diary, years later, he wrote, "Success happened. Art remains the question. That for mine." For him, every spotlight was a test. Would the craft survive the applause? When he became Severus Snape, the world claimed him. Children mimicked his tone, his robes, his cold stare. But Rickman's own reflection grew blurred. The more perfect Snape became, the less he saw of Alan. He never treated Harry Potter lightly. To him, Snape was Shakespearean, layered with pain and sacrifice. But that depth came at a cost. The studio's relentless schedule, the press, the sameness of 10 years within one role each drained him. He began writing more often, almost daily, as though ink were oxygen. In one entry, he confessed, "It's as if I'm walking inside a costume I cannot remove." He suffered quietly from illness even during filming. Diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2005, he kept working, enduring surgeries and fatigue. When offered the chance to leave the series, he refused. "Snape deserves closure," he wrote. That sentence captured his essence. Duty over comfort. Art over ease. Behind the scenes, his kindness surfaced in small gestures, helping young actors, defending crew members, offering notes on scenes to elevate others' work. Fame had crowned him, but he wore it like a borrowed coat, grateful, yet uneasy. The cost of being known was being misunderstood. As years passed, the applause that once felt warm began to echo. Hollywood wanted villains. Theater wanted time he no longer had. The illness returned, more quietly, more cruelly. Yet he refused pity. To colleagues he was the same, sharp, dry, composed. In the diary, fatigue seeped between the lines. One day he wrote about shooting while in pain, another about feeling disconnected from the industry he once revered. Still, he never surrendered bitterness. His reflections on others remained generous. Admiration for Daniel Radcliffe's focus, Emma Watson's intelligence, Maggie Smith's endurance. But there was also disillusionment. He described meetings where art bowed to profit, where honesty was mistaken for arrogance. "The business eats its own," he noted. That realism didn't make him colder, it made him braver. He began directing, searching for stories that meant something beyond spectacle. Each project became a small rebellion against the noise of fame. Yet inside, the man who once drew light from precision now struggled to hold it steady. The diary captured that quiet erosion, an artist aware that his time was finite, but his standards eternal. In December 2015, Alan Rickman gathered with friends for what few knew would be a farewell. The diagnosis, pancreatic cancer, had returned. He told almost no one. The silence was deliberate, almost protective. He didn't want his final chapter rewritten by sympathy. His last days were private, surrounded by his wife Rima and close companions. There were no headlines, no staged goodbyes. He wrote until he couldn't. One of his final notes read, "Nothing lasts forever, least of all pain." When news of his passing broke in January 2016, the world froze. Fans mourned as if losing a friend they had never met. The cast of Harry Potter, his students, spoke of him not as an icon, but as a mentor who saw them long before cameras did. He exited life as he had lived it gracefully, without spectacle. The curtain fell not with thunder, but with silence. And in that silence, his words waited. 6 years later, in 2022, madly, deeply, The Diaries of Alan Rickman was published. For the first time, readers entered his mind unfiltered. What they found was not bitterness or complaint, but humor, warmth, candor, and endless curiosity. The book revealed a man perpetually dissecting his own art, loving fiercely, doubting constantly, yet never ceasing to believe in truth. The world finally saw what fame had hidden, a heart behind the precision. Critics called the diaries a map to the soul of an artist. Fans called them a final performance, written, not acted. Today, his voice still echoes in films, in words, in the single syllable that became immortal. Always. He never chased immortality, yet it found him. The light dimmed, the ink dried, but the pages remain proof that even in silence, a man can still speak. Fame remembers faces. but memory remembers truths. Alan Rickman's life was not a tragedy, it was a study in grace. He moved through the noise of celebrity with the stillness of someone who understood that applause fades faster than sincerity. The diaries he left behind didn't expose scandals. They revealed something rarer: discipline, doubt, and devotion to the craft that defined him. In his silence, he protected what mattered most: integrity. In his words, he released what the camera could never show: vulnerability. Like Severus Snape, Rickman became a symbol of contradictions: harsh but tender, distant but loyal, mortal yet eternal. The man who once hid behind scripts found, in his final pages, a kind of immortality that fame alone could never promise. The stage lights have long gone cold, yet his voice lingers not as a sound, but as an echo of truth. He taught us that the greatest performances are not the ones we see, but the ones that quietly endure when the curtain falls. For Alan Rickman, the end was not silence. It was completion. If his words still echo in your heart, take a moment to remember the man behind the voice, the one who turned restraint into art and silence into meaning. Tell us what Alan Rickman meant to you, and which of his performances lives on in your memory. Share, reflect, and keep his story alive, because behind every role, there's a soul that once whispered truth through fiction. And never forget, fame and shadows. Every star has its story.